There are places where silence feels wrong. Places where the walls remember more than they should. And the darkness is never truly empty. When Otto Kramer takes a job as a night keeper in an ancient library, he believes he is alone. Until the whispers begin. Until a strange light appears in the aisles. And until one man shows him the way. Welcome to Short Ghost Stories, Long After Midnight. Whispers in the Library. The old library stood at the end of Belgrave Street, where the houses leaned close together and the lamps burned dim even in fair weather. It was older than most buildings in the town, older than the church tower, older even than the stone bridge over the Black Canal. Its foundations had been laid, so people said, before anyone remembered the name of the first mayor, and its walls had survived plague, fire, war, and several generations of men who thought themselves permanent. By day, the library looked solemn but respectable. Scholars climbed its worn steps with notebooks under their arms. Schoolboys whispered beneath the stern gaze of marble busts. Elderly gentlemen fell asleep over newspapers in the reading room, and ladies in dark gloves asked politely for books on travel, religion, botany, and mourning customs. But when evening came, the building changed. The last visitors always left quickly. The librarians never lingered after dusk. Chairs were pushed in, ink bottles closed, candles snuffed, catalogs covered, and keys taken from drawers with unusual haste. The great front door was locked before the final church bell had finished striking. After that, the library belonged to the dark. Those who lived nearby had heard things. Voices, they said, where no voices should be. Soft murmuring from behind bricked-up windows. Tiny lights drifting behind the glass in rooms that had not been opened for years. Once, a constable swore he saw a pale glow moving between the upper shelves long after midnight, as if someone were carrying a candle through the aisles. No one liked speaking of it directly. The town preferred old stories to remain old. But every few years, when the position of night keeper was advertised, the same silence returned. No librarian wanted the post. No retired soldier wanted it. No widower, no student, no man desperate for wages wanted it once he learned what the work involved. Then, Otto Kramer saw the advertisement in the local newspaper. It was short, plain, and oddly formal. Night keeper required. Belgrave Library. Duties light. Hours from closing until morning. Applied to the director. Otto read it twice over breakfast in a cheap lodging house near the railway station. He was 24, recently arrived in town, and nearly out of money. He had no family nearby, no position waiting for him, and no patience left for the proud humiliations of unemployment. By noon, he was standing before the library doors. Inside, the air smelled of dust, leather, ink, and old wood polished by 1,000 careful hands. The entrance hall rose high above him, dark and impressive, with a ceiling painted in faded blue and gold. To either side stretched corridors lined with shelves, and beyond them reading rooms, staircases, galleries, and doors that seemed to belong to older portions of the building. The director received him in a narrow office overlooking the courtyard. Theodore Hall was a kind-hearted, middle-aged man with tired eyes and a careful manner. His hair began to gray at the temples, and his clothes, though well-kept, seemed to have belonged to him for many years. He shook Otto's hand warmly, but there was a sadness in his expression that Otto could not quite explain. "You understand the hours, young man?" Hall asked. "From closing until morning." "And you are not troubled by being alone?" Otto smiled a little. "I have been alone in worse places than a library, sir." Hall looked at him for a moment longer than necessary. "Good. Then your duties are simple. You will see that all doors and windows remain locked. You will walk the aisles every hour, and if anything appears out of order, you will note it in the book on the front desk." "Anything unusual?" Otto asked. Hall's face changed only slightly. "Yes," he said. "Anything unusual." He showed Otto the main reading room, the catalog desks, the side passage, the rear door to the courtyard, the upper gallery, and the long central aisle that stretched between towering shelves like a road through a forest of books. Gas lamps burned low along the walls, casting soft yellow pools of light that did not quite reach the ceiling. At last, Hall placed a heavy keyring in Otto's hand. "One more thing," he said quietly. "Do not allow your lantern to go out." Otto looked at him. "Is that one of the official duties?" Hall tried to smile. "In this building, Mr. Kramer, I have found that old habits are often wiser than new explanations." That evening, Otto began his first night. At closing, he locked the doors himself. He checked the windows. He pulled at each handle, listened to each latch, and satisfied himself that no one could enter without a key. The last librarian wished him a good night with an expression that was almost pity, then hurried down the steps into the fog. Soon, the library was silent. At first, Otto found the work peaceful. He sat at the front desk with the lantern beside him, watching the shadows deepen along the distant aisles. The building creaked now and then, as old buildings do. Pipes knocked. Wood settled. Somewhere high above, rain began to tap against the glass roof of the upper gallery. At 9 o'clock, he made his first round. Nothing. At 10, the same. At 11, he began to understand why the place unsettled people. The library was too large for its own silence. Every footstep seemed to travel ahead of him and return from some other direction. Every shelf looked like the last, and yet no aisle appeared quite the same when he returned. Then, just before midnight, Otto saw an old man standing beside the history section. He stopped at once. The stranger was thin, upright, and dressed in an old-fashioned dark coat. His face was pale and deeply lined, with eyes that reflected the lantern light strangely. He held his hands behind his back and looked at Otto as if he had been expecting him. "Who are you?" Otto demanded. The old man inclined his head. "Duncan Smith." "How did you get in?" "I know the place well." "That was not my question." "No," the old man said softly. "But it is the answer you need." Otto raised the lantern. The building was locked. I locked it myself." Duncan Smith glanced at the shelves around them. "Locks are made for doors, Mr. Kramer, not for memories." Otto felt a coldness move through him. "You know my name?" "I know every night keeper's name." "You work here?" "I did." The old man stepped closer, and Otto noticed that his boots made no sound on the carpet. "I came to give you practical advice," Duncan said. "Never let your lantern go out." "So I have been told." "And when you see the light, follow it." "What light?" Duncan looked past him, down the aisle, into the darkness between the shelves. "The one that wants to be followed." Otto turned instinctively. There was nothing there. When he looked back, Duncan Smith was gone. For several moments, Otto did not move. Then he walked quickly through the nearby aisles, lifting the lantern high, searching behind shelves, beneath tables, around corners, behind doors. There was nowhere the old man could have gone. The rear door was still locked. The windows were fastened. The front entrance had not been opened. Yet he was alone. At least he appeared to be. After midnight, the whispers began. They were faint at first, so faint that Otto thought they might be rain in the gutters or wind pressing itself into cracks in the stone. But the longer he listened, the more certain he became that the sounds were voices. They came from the walls. They came from the shelves. They seemed to move behind the leather bindings, under the floorboards, above the ceiling, inside the very bones of the building. Otto forced himself to continue his round. Then he saw the light. It appeared halfway down the eastern aisle, no larger than a candle flame, floating at shoulder height. It was not the yellow light of gas, nor the orange light of fire. It was pale and soft, like moonlight caught inside glass. The orb hovered in silence. Otto remembered Duncan's words. When you see the light, follow it. He should have returned to the desk. He should have written the incident in the book and waited for morning. Instead, he walked forward. The light drifted away. Otto followed. It led him between shelves, past locked cabinets, through a reading room he did not remember entering before, and into a narrow passage where the walls were hung with portraits of former directors, benefactors, scholars, and dead men whose names had faded from the brass plates beneath their flames. At the end of the passage hung a large portrait in a gold frame. The man in the painting had a severe face, black robes, and one hand resting on a closed book. The frame was carved with strange ornaments, vines, eyes, keys, and small open mouths twisted as if in speech. The light passed through the portrait. Otto stopped. The whispers grew clearer. Follow the light. He stepped forward and touched the frame. Dust came away beneath his fingers. The painting shifted slightly. Follow the light. With effort, Otto lifted the portrait from the wall. Behind it was a door. Not a proper door with handle and hinges, but a narrow stone opening descending into darkness. A curled staircase led downward, tight and steep, vanishing below the level of the library. Otto held up the lantern. The frame trembled. For one dreadful moment, he almost turned back. Then, the little orb appeared below him on the stairs. It waited. Otto descended. The air changed as he went down. It became colder and older, heavy with the smell of sealed rooms, damp stone, mold, and paper untouched for generations. The whispers followed him, no longer vague, but close to his ears. Some sounded afraid, some sounded eager, some sounded as if they were trying to remember how to speak. At the bottom of the staircase, Otto found another library. It was smaller than the one above, but far older. The shelves were rough, blackened wood. Chains hung from some of them, though the books they once held had long since rotted away or vanished. Dust lay thick on tables. Cobwebs sagged from the ceiling like funeral cloth. Along one wall stood cabinets with clouded glass doors. The orb moved ahead of him. It crossed the chamber and rose toward a high shelf near the back wall. There alone, among cracked bindings and worm-eaten spines, stood a book bound in dark leather. It seemed untouched by decay. Its cover had no title, no author. Only a small symbol pressed into the leather, a key within an open eye. The orb hovered over it. "Take it," the whispers said. Otto swallowed. A sliding ladder stood nearby, stiff with age. He pulled it along its rail, and the sound it made was like a cry in the buried room. Slowly, carefully, he began to climb. Halfway up, the ground shook. Dust fell from the shelves. Somewhere behind him, wood split. The lantern flame bent sideways, though there was no wind. "Take it." The voices were no longer whispering. They were urgent, desperate, surrounding him. "Take it and go." Otto reached the shelf, seized the book, and pulled it free. The entire room shuddered. Something heavy moved in the darkness below the floor. Otto climbed down as fast as he dared, clutching the book under one arm and the lantern in the other hand. The orb darted back toward the stairs. He followed it without thinking, stumbling upward as the stone passage groaned around him. When he reached the top, the portrait hung open beside him. The library above was dark, still, waiting. The orb vanished. Otto placed the portrait back on the wall with shaking hands. Then he returned to the front desk, laid the book before him, and sat with his lantern burning until his strength failed. Morning came gray and cold. Otto woke to the sound of keys rattling in the front door. Theodore Hall entered with the brisk step of a man who had expected trouble and dreaded being correct. He stopped when he saw Otto slumped at the desk. "Mr. Kramer?" Otto lifted his head. "I am here." Hall came closer. "Are you hurt?" "No." The director saw the book. His face lost its color. "Where did you get this?" Otto looked down at the dark leather binding. Below." "Below where?" "The library." Hall stared at him. Otto told him everything. Duncan Smith, the orb of light, the portrait, the staircase, the hidden room, the shaking shelves, the voices urging him to take the book and leave. When he finished, Hall said nothing for a long while. Then he whispered, "Show me." They walked together to the passage of portraits. Otto found the gold frame at once and placed both hands on it. It did not move. He tried again. Nothing. Hall helped him remove the portrait from the wall. Behind it was only stone. Solid, cold, unbroken stone. Otto stepped back. No, it was here. Hall touched the wall carefully. There is no door. There was. Mr. Kramer, I'm not lying. Hall looked at him, troubled and pale. You said a man came to you? Duncan Smith? Yes. The director lowered his hand from the wall. Duncan Smith was nightkeeper here more than 50 years ago. He vanished during a storm in winter. They searched the entire building and found no trace of him. Otto said nothing. Hall turned slowly toward the front desk where the book still lay waiting. By noon, the director had locked the volume in his office. By evening, he had sent telegrams to 2 scholars and 1 private collector known to specialize in rare printed works. The first to arrive was Professor Edmund Vane, an expert in early European printing, a dry, narrow man with spectacles, trembling hands, and no patience for superstition. He examined the book under a green-shaded lamp while Hall and Otto watched in silence. At first, he muttered to himself. Then he stopped muttering. Then he sat back. My God, he said. Hall leaned forward. What is it? He turned the first few pages with reverence and dread. This should not exist. Is it valuable? Hall asked. The professor gave a strange laugh. Valuable? Mr. Hall, if this is genuine, it is beyond valuation. Otto looked at the book as if it might move. What is it? Vane adjusted his spectacles. A first edition. Possibly the first and only printed copy of De Lumine Sub Terra, On the Light Beneath the Earth. It was believed destroyed before distribution, suppressed, condemned, mentioned only in fragments and court records. Suppressed by whom? Hall asked. Church authorities, civil authorities. Anyone sensible enough to fear what men will do when they mistake forbidden knowledge for wisdom. The room seemed to grow colder. Vane turned another page. There are accounts here of buried chambers, lights seen under old buildings, voices heard in libraries and monasteries, and certain rituals of concealment. There are names too, places, dates. Many of them were believed to be legends. His voice faltered. What is it? Otto asked. The professor had turned to the final pages. On one of them was a handwritten note in faded ink. Not part of the original printing, he said. Edit later. He read silently, then slowly looked up at Hall. This note was written by Duncan Smith. Hall gripped the back of a chair. What does it say? Vane hesitated. It says, I have found it. I have hidden it where the light instructed me. If the book remains below, so must I. If the book is brought up, I shall be released. No one spoke. Outside the office, somewhere deep in the library, a shelf creaked. Otto felt the hair rise at the back of his neck. Hall whispered. Released? The professor closed the book with sudden care. I believe, he said, that your former night keeper did not vanish because he was taken by the library. He looked toward the darkening windows. I believe he bound himself to it. That night, Otto refused to go home. Hall told him he had no obligation to remain, but Otto insisted. The book had been locked in a cabinet. Professor Vane had left in a hurry, promising to return in the morning with proper equipment, proper papers, proper witnesses. Yet none of his proper words had removed the look of fear from his face. At closing, the library was quieter than it had been before. Too quiet. There were no whispers, no lights, no movement among the shelves. Otto walked the aisles with his lantern raised high, but the silence was worse than the voices had been. The building no longer seemed haunted. It seemed emptied. At midnight, he reached the passage of portraits. The gold-framed portrait hung exactly where it had always been. Otto stared at it for a long time. He wondered whether the hidden staircase had truly existed. He wondered whether the room below was gone forever. Then his lantern flickered. A soft footstep sounded behind him. Otto turned. At the far end of the aisle stood Duncan Smith. He looked different now, less pale, more solid. His old-fashioned coat was damp, as if he had come in from rain. His face, once thin and faded, now held a terrible calm. He smiled at Otto with gratitude that was almost tender. You followed the light, Duncan said. Otto could not move. You found the treasure, the old man continued. No one else would have been brave enough. What are you? Duncan's smile faded. A man who waited too long in the dark. The book released you? Yes. From the library? Duncan looked around the shelves, the portraits, the lamps, the locked doors. From duty. Otto tightened his grip on the lantern. And what happens now? Duncan Smith stepped backward into the shadow between two shelves. Now, Mr. Kramer, someone else must keep watch. The lantern flame went out. In the darkness, the whispers returned all at once. Not softly, not from the walls, from everywhere. And somewhere beyond the locked doors of Belgrave Library, beneath a moon hidden by cloud, a man who had been dead for 50 years walked into the sleeping town and took his first breath beneath the open sky. You're still listening. Most people turn away before the last candle burns out. But you stayed to hear the story to its end. Perhaps you're braver than most. Or perhaps you simply enjoy the company of things that move quietly in the dark. If tonight's story found its way into your imagination, consider liking the video, sharing it, and subscribing to the channel. After all, the next story may already be waiting just outside the door. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you again for short ghost stories, long after midnight.